deliberations for our long-term plan, and thank you for everybody's efforts yesterday. It was a bit of a long day, so I hope you had a restful evening and ready to crack into the remainder of deliberations today. So we will kick off looking at the funding requests that have come through, which are listed in a table in your agenda papers from page number 40. The first one up is the funding request from, and just to note, we have apologies for lateness from Councillor Wright, so if I could just have a mover and seconder. Thank you, Deputy Mayor Brosnan and Councillor Price. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, carried. Thank you for reminding me about that. Our first funding request we have is the Enviro Schools, who are looking for a continuation of their current contribution of $15,000 per annum, which has been funded out of the Council Projects Fund previously. Just to advise, I know there has been some councillors wishing to seek advice as to whether this can be converted into a service level agreement. So I'll just ask that Adele Henderson provide some comment on that.
I'll just, through the Mayor, I'll just get Natasha to talk to that.
Morena councillors. So through the Chair, the service agreements, there is some funding available in the service agreement allocation, and we would have to ask Enviro Schools to put forward a proposal, as the others have done, so that they follow the same process. Alternatively, they could make an application through the Council Projects Fund, which has been recommended, as that is the funding priorities and outcomes align better with what Enviro Schools has to offer.
I'll open that up for any questions from councillors and considerations. Councillor Price.
Just a question, is there more security in having a service agreement for them?
Through the Chair, the service agreements are reviewed every 3 years, so it's about the same. And the other thing to note is that this year we are undertaking a review of the grant system, and so the service agreements is part of that scoping around particularly how service agreements are awarded and or terminated. There's no clarity at this stage.
And just also a reminder that the Council Projects Fund has been cut in half, proposed to be cut in half in this LTP as well. So it was previously $200,000 per annum, and it's now $100,000 per annum.
And through the Mayor, so under the provisions for the community grants, we did have this unallocated service agreement available for any new agreement. So the recommendation from a financial perspective is probably to utilise that in the first instance.
Just seeking some clarity. Sorry, Your Worship. So Adele, you're just letting us know that there is some funding available in the service level agreement pool as it currently stands, and this could be something we could prioritise through that, and that would be a 3-year service agreement?
Yes, that's correct, for $20,000.
However, we would only be using 15,000 of that. That's what's been requested.
Through the Chair,
Per
just one more thing to note. The service agreements, the current service agreements are all currently being assessed, and I've provided you with some proposed amounts that we're looking at, and so I think it would be prudent for, if we were to go that way, for Enviro Schools to apply for through the process for a service agreement, because there's quite some rigour around how those service agreements are assessed and reviewed and then awarded. So there is that funding subject to that process being undertaken.
Exactly. So our recommendation to Enviro Schools would be that they apply for a service level agreement through the appropriate assessment process. Deputy Mayor Brosnan.
Quite happy with that approach, Your Worship. Just wondering if there's any way we could give some certainty, I suppose, as part of that, understanding the rigour of the process that needs to happen, but I'd hate for them to be channelled into, I suppose, an internal process that maybe ends up with them not receiving funding when council's direction may be to continue funding.
So just to seek some, I guess, confirmation that they will meet the assessment criteria if they apply.
Through the chair, as I said at the beginning, I believe that their what they're offering is better suited to the council projects fund. However, they do meet a number of the criteria around community need and benefit, and I think the thing that we would be wanting to negotiate with them is the outcomes and the deliverables around their service agreement. So that would be between EnviroSchools and us in terms of making sure that that was achievable. So yes, it does align. We would just have to go through the process to see how strongly it is aligned.
So there is a risk that they may not actually meet the required criteria and would not therefore get the funding.
They would meet the criteria, but in terms of the amount allocated, that does depend on how well they meet the criteria and how they're assessed against all the others.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I suppose the option here is that you are giving EnviroSchools two options as opposed to just directing them to the council projects fund. So it would not be mutually exclusive. You could apply for the service level agreement, and if it's found through that process that it's not aligned, then EnviroSchools can absolutely go through the council projects fund. So two options.
Councillor Brown.
Thank you. Is there somewhere where we can see the criteria for each of these four funds easily?
Through the chair, the funding is on the website, the community grants and the council projects fund.
And the community development grants?
Yes.
Yeah. And then the service level agreements?
The service level agreements are individually assessed and then ranked against the same criteria as so it's the same criteria in terms of meeting council priorities and the community need, community benefit and capacity to deliver. Yep.
Councillor Crystal.
To the service level agreement, is there a set pool? So if they came into that pool, would then the others get less? Is that?
Through the chair, there is a set pool. It's a budgeted item,
Yeah.
but there is some wriggle room, if you like, as through that assessment process. And as Adele has pointed out, there is a $20,000 leeway for new service agreements that generally we use within that 3-year period to bring new ones on. So in the past, for example, we funded the outreach service initially to get that going through that process.
Deputy Mayor Brosnan.
I'm a little torn, to be honest, because this is a space that I don't want to limit our budget in. I'd like us to maintain flexibility to support programs over the 3-year term. Is there any options, Adele, for additional budget to come into this if we were looking, rather than a $20,000 gap, is there some budget somewhere that we could find to make that gap bigger so that if we were to use up that contingency with EnviroSchools, we're not limiting other potential service requests that come our way?
Through the Mayor, unfortunately this year's been one of our tightest budgets ever, and so we've had to put quite strict constraints across the board.
Councillor Bogue.
Just another question, please, through you, Madam Mayor. Where is this $15,000 per annum, which is obviously what we're doing now? Where is this coming from? And if we remove it and suggest they go somewhere else, will there be excess left over in the fund that this $15,000 per annum is currently coming from?
It currently comes from the Council Projects Fund. So
Is that this?
no.
Right.
Right.
It's one of them.
Through the chair, so
So that we've
at the
halved.
last LTP, the council agreed to provide the funding through the council projects fund of $15,000 per annum. So it was really allocated from that fund, but didn't go through the process, which is an option for you today.
Councillor McGrath.
Is there an option to split?
No.
So the first year comes from the project fund while they apply for the service level agreement, so they've got certainty for at least 12 months?
The service level agreements are all assessed and re-signed at 3-year intervals, which is what's currently happening. So you couldn't defer
One and make it a
and
two-year
it would
level.
just be for 2 years, and then they'd enter into the cycle.
Yeah.
So we'll be doing this again in 3 years, subject to the grants review, of course.
I would like to recommend that we actually provide a feedback for them to initially try through the service level agreement process. However, if they are unsuccessful or only partially successful in attaining the funding required, that they then have the option of the council project fund being used to fund any difference between the 15,000 and what they actually receive through a service level agreement.
Good compromise.
Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, I'm happy to support that because I believe if they go through the service agreement process, we will see greater rigour as to the outcomes, because I have some concerns that their presentation indicated that they had contact with a number of schools, but when we actually spoke to one of those schools, they said they didn't know about it. So I'd like to see greater rigour placed on the outcomes that they provide.
Yeah. So just in terms of wording for that, we would like to recommend that Enviro schools apply for a service level agreement through the appropriate assessment process. And subject to the outcome, the council projects fund can be utilised. Adele.
Just through the mayor, just also noting that you've got other commitments potentially coming against that fund through the year, so it depends on whether there's any available funds.
Yeah. Subject, yeah, and availability. Councillor Tappening.
Question for staff, if I may. When and how will this be reported back to council? Not, well, I could rather all of these will through some mechanism, but would like to have some reminder, really, about when we'll get a chance to check on the progress of these applications.
Through the mayor, so the service agreements will be provided, the service agreement outcomes can be provided to council through a paper. Should the Enviro schools need to go through council projects fund, that comes back to you for decision.
Moving on to our,
Does that have to be seconded or anything, or later on?
typically we've done funding requests as a bulk in the past, yeah.
Because I would second it if that is needed.
Next up, we've got the New Zealand Memorial Museum Trust request for $63,000 for a historic building and to be converted into a museum and visitor centre in France. I think we had this last year or last long-term plan as well. We've certainly had it before. So we do have a management recommendation here that this request may be better directed to central government, who may be better placed to contribute to national and international memorials. I support that recommendation from management. Do we have any differing views on that? Councillor Bogue.
I don't differ, I agree with that, but I did have an extra comment that for your consideration to go to Mr McKinnon was that another suggestion is to publicise your campaign locally and seek direct donations from people who support your project.
Happy to include that.
Thank you.
Next up, we have the Hawke's Bay Community Fitness Centre Trust requesting a grant of $2 million, which we have had a number of presentations on from the Trust over recent years. This funding has not been included as a separate consultation topic in our consultation document. Council could consider the funding through a loan. And just to ask Adele, the impact on that on rates would be?
Through the Mayor, so the cost of that would be $90,000 in interest and principal costs per year, which would equate to a 0.14% rates increase. 0.14.
I'm conscious that we have made a significant investment in the facility that we're sitting in today already, and we do also have some future conversations to be had with the Trust again, who run the facility that we're sitting in today. So personally, I would not support loan funding a $2 million grant for the Hawke's Bay Community Fitness Centre Trust.
Support that.
So do I support that.
Support your view.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, is there anyone with a different view that would like to support loan funding this?
I respect your opinion very much. I think that we have been placed in a very difficult situation, as officers have indicated in the previous LTP discussions, many of which some of the councillors weren't involved in. We, to term a phrase, pledged an unbudgeted item of $2 million and gave the Regional Fitness Centre Trust some indication that we would contribute $2 million towards that project. That was under the former mayor, and we have also provided a similar letter in this period, and I would hate to see the development that is taking place at the Regional Sports Park under Mr Avery's control fail through the lack of the funding that we indicated that we would provide. I think that we have talked about having a strategic plan that Sport Hawke's Bay have talked to in these submissions, and the Regional Sports Park is just part of the whole region's facilities. And I suspect that in the next 10 years, and the period of this long-term plan, that facility will become an area that the country will be jealous of. And you only have to visit it in the weekends, in the evening, and you will see that there are hundreds of thousands of people using that facility already. And I would hate to see it fall down because we gave an indication of $2 million some time ago that would either be in the 21-22 or the 22-23 financial year. And I think that there's a huge risk of, the point of phrase, egg on my face if that was to fail because we don't live up to what we had indicated we would provide. Thank you.
Councillor McGrath.
Just through the chair, when we were first invited out to the park, it was all about helping the locals. And it's got, for me, it's got wildly out of hand for a local facility. It's now a regional and national facility. The initial building is going to be extended. It's not just a 50-metre pool, it's now 25 by 15 as well, plus 2 other pools. It's just growing and growing and growing from what we were first shown. And you've got to work within the budget that you have. And if you keep growing, you're obviously not. There are other needs within Hawke's Bay as well. We've shelved Park Island to some degree. PGA is going to need some money. McLean Park is a regional facility as well. So I just don't think we're in a position to give that money.
Through you, Madam Mayor, we are just working to see if there's any capacity in any year. Certainly would not be year 1 and unlikely to be year 2. So officers will just have a quick look at if there's any capacity.
Deputy Mayor Brosnan.
Thank you, Your Worship. I don't disagree, I think, with anything Councillor Taylor said. I think for me it comes down to, will this project succeed without this level of funding from us? And I truly believe that, that the funding ability that's within that trust at the moment and the amazing work they've been able to do, they will be able to push forward with their projects without us. Without this $2 million. I think from my perspective, it's been really clear from the beginning that was an unbudgeted line in our plans. It was kind of a request that came to a reasonably similar forum to this, that we didn't have the money to assign to it, but we signalled we would be interested in supporting. Since then, we have had a COVID year, which has more than stripped $2 million out of our budget. We've had the flood, which has, done similar damage to us in terms of a budget, our budgets, and our community as well is hurting from both of those events. We've needed to increase our investment in things like the PGA, which is another regional facility that isn't contributed to in the same way that the regional sports park is from our colleagues across the river. So, even if we did have capacity in future years, it's not something that I would support us funding to that great degree, because I think we will have a number of other close to home projects that will need our support to succeed. And I don't believe the regional park needs our support at this stage to succeed. As Councillor McGrath rightly pointed out, they are doing amazingly well. It's my view.
Thank you. Councillor Bogue.
Yes, I guess the question that the Deputy Mayor raised about would this project succeed without us is quite valid. However, do we want to be part of this project that a lot of our people are going to benefit from? I'm wondering if I tend to support Councillor Taylor's support for this project, but I'm wondering if it could be less than 2 million, if we could look at a smaller amount so that we have some skin in the game, as it were, and to show that we are supportive of this project, because many of our own citizens are going to benefit from it, are already benefiting from that park.
Councillor Price.
It's a real difficult one, this one. We certainly use it, Napier people use it, and it's a high performance area that is good for the region. What does concern me is we want to complete PGA into a great regional facility, and I don't want us to spend all of our money without doing our job in Napier. And there's been no assistance come from Hastings, which disappoints me. But I'm not saying I'm not doing that because of that. It's just we should all jump on board with everything that is regional. Thank you.
Oh, me. It's not the same kind of.
For you, Madam Mayor, once you have finished discussing, I think we might need a little bit more time if we could come back to this one last. Officers would appreciate that.
Before we park it, I would just like an indication of if there are a number of us that wish to still consider some sort of contribution. Otherwise, we don't want to have staff working on something that we don't actually have the numbers to support anyway. So if we could just have an indication if you'd like staff to continue looking at some sort of possible contribution before they go and crunch the numbers.
Do we support some contribution?
Yeah, so you're not saying the 2 million?
No.
Just, yeah.
Yeah, so we look like we've got about 7 maybe, so. Yeah. Okay, so we'll park that for now. And just as an indication of what contribution you would be supportive of? 1 million? 500. 500. Okay. So if we could have some, figures around $1 million contribution in year 2, if that is feasible for year 2?
So through the Mayor, so once we draw down a loan, the way that it works is that then falls into the rates increases for the following years. So if we were to draw down that loan in year 1, that would then impact on our year 2 rates increases. So we do have a small capacity within year 2 of our budgets, nothing within year 1. Obviously, to take it out this year, we couldn't do it, is what we're saying. But yeah, we could incorporate it into that year 2.
So we could draw down the loan on the 1st of July 2021.
Yes,
And then the rating impact would be from 2022.
that's correct.
Through Madam Chair, while the staff are doing some work on this and we deliberate over other matters, they also look up for us the forecast economic benefits for the region projected from sports facility in the regional sports facility. That might assist us in our considerations on the basis that some of us might be looking at simply hard assets over there, whereas there's wider social and economic benefits from that. And there must be somewhere an economic forecast around what the benefits are, and perhaps even more detail to the benefits of nature with accommodation and retail.
We can certainly see if that information is available easily.
Yeah, through you, Madam Mayor, we'll check with Hastings District Council and see if they can provide us with something.
I don't mean spend, I just mean do a quick search, and if nothing comes up, then nothing comes up. Yep.
Just based on the information that Adele provided earlier on a $2 million loan, the impact of that was going to be a 0.14% impact on rates. So 1 million would be 0.07%. So I'm just wondering, do we need any other additional information on that side of things, or are we just seeking some additional information around the wider economic impact? Councillor Taylor.
Could I just make a comment that I believe that in one of his presentations he actually provided information on the economic and social impact, whether it was localised or it may have been on a national basis of what a facility like that provides to its community.
Through you, Madam Mayor, we do have that information. I'll just check in to see if there's any updated information, as I know that Hastings were deliberating on this over the last couple of days.
Okay, so next we have the Regional Indoor Sports and Events Centre Trust, and there isn't actually any request for additional capital funding coming through from this trust at this point in time. So we have got requests here with regards to increased funding towards operating costs due to, of course, the fact that this facility is looking to expand, and we've got some officer recommendations here around increasing, not to the extent that has been requested, but to a lower value from year 2 of 100,000, which is an increase of 45,000, And just with a caveat that officers will work with the PGA to better understand the new operating environment before we commit to permanent increased operating funding going forward. Councillor Simpson. That wasn't actually part of their original submission, so we can't consider that as part of today's deliberations, but we will certainly engage with the Trust. And the reason they wouldn't have had that in the original submission is that that was part of the consent that they have only just received prior to submissions closing. But certainly at the level of funding requested of 600,000, we can engage with them on that outside of the LTP process.
Thank you. You cut me off.
Can I ask a question, a clarification that was raised in the verbal submission, Your Worship, and it's probably to Richard. It's around the requirement for the temporary parking, and I think an additional $1 million worth of capital cost that came through in the resource consent. Have you got any comment on that? That seems slightly counterintuitive to me, but...
The consent process obviously had to address it as it was. What I have done is gone back to the team to have a think about what the national standard around parking now means for that. We have no conclusions on that yet, but we needed to give certainty in terms of the consent. As you know, Craig did mention, the successful lotto application, which is on the back of certainty with the consent. So rather than mucking around trying to work out whether or not how it applies and whether we are able to use that discretion, we decided to go with what was in the plan to require that parking. So I think that is something to, explore now, but in the meantime, what is in front of you is the certainty of that consent.
Councillor Price, then Councillor Wright.
Just a supplementary to that, Richard. Just a supplementary to that. So that could be revisited and downgraded, the requirement of the car park?
I don't want to give any certainty around that.
Or revisit it then?
I think it is something to explore.
Okay.
But at the meantime, I think you need to take on face value that the temporary parking is required.
Okay. Because where the confusion comes in is if you're a netball player and you go to the netball courts and the work they're doing at the sports park, the parking is disgraceful. And that's where people get a bit, what's happening? Thank you. I understand your position.
Councillor Wright.
I understand there was also a request that we consider reviewing their operating model, and as a former chairperson of the Trust, I would like to endorse that sentiment. The setup of the original Trust was a new thing to see whether this model would be successful in delivering these services to the region, and it has been fraught with challenges, and I think everyone that's been involved with the Trust would understand those challenges over the years that it's been operating. So I think the request for a review of that operating model is fair and timely, particularly as we're moving to develop the facility into a larger regional centre. So I would like us to make a commitment to that today and set aside some resourcing to ensure that happens as soon as possible.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. I concur with your comments. So I guess just to summarise, that there were sort of three separate components to the request that's come through from the Trust. There's the increase to operating budgets, which we have a recommendation to temporarily increase to 100,000 while we do a full review scoping the new facility. There's also been a request to increase the annual asset renewal contribution that we make. We currently make 30,000, and they've been requesting that we increase that to 90,000 per annum. The officer's recommendation is that we temporarily increase to 50,000 again while we undertake a review, And then, as Councillor Wright has pointed out, the third component of the submission included an operational effectiveness review, which I wholeheartedly support, setting aside some resourcing to undertake that in either year 2 or 3 of the long-term plan. So, questions from the money lady. How will we be funding these proposed increases?
Through the Mayor, these would have to be rates funded to have a balanced budget.
Okay, so this would be additional rates funding that's not currently
That's correct.
in our proposed LTP. So 65,000 in year 2 across the operating and asset renewal, which would equate to about a 0.1% rates impact.
Just a question.
Yeah.
So, would year 3, when this comes into effect, because won't affect your rates till the year after, and this won't be finished for a year?
Well, we wouldn't be loan funding it, we'd be rate funding it.
And paying that.
So
Yeah,
it
so
would
it would be
impact from the
year.
year.
Year 3.
Well, it depends if we agree to increasing this from year 2 or increasing it from year 3. Councillor Wright.
There also needs to be consideration that there are other stakeholders when we're going to look at an operational review. So the current stakeholders are the Hastings District Council and the EIT, and maybe that they could contribute to that actual piece of work, because they will definitely need to be included in the consultation around it.
And through the Mayor, so in relation to the discussions, certainly we have been working with Hastings around some of the recommendations that have been put forward today. And so EIT, we haven't had the same level of discussions to date, but note your comments.
And do we have an indication from Hastings as to their likelihood of contributing to any increased operating costs?
Through the Mayor, they're supportive of the same views that we've tabled with Council today.
Okay. So therefore, yes, so the impact for us will only be half the...
Through the
Oh,
Mayor.
both doing the same amount,
That's
right,
it.
yeah, okay. Okay. I'm happy to support the officer's recommendations as in our paper, and just acknowledging that from year 2, we'd be looking at around a 0.1% rates impact. For the operational effectiveness review, would we have the capacity to fund that with existing resourcing, or would we also need to tag some additional budget for that?
Through the Mayor, I have had discussions with Glenn to date. We believe that we can, because it is probably year 3, but because it wouldn't be significant in terms of the total dollars, we could look at that as part of the annual plan process anyway.
Excellent, thank you. Okay. So on the table, we have a recommendation to support the officer's recommendation of a $100,000 OPEX budget from year 2 and a $50,000 asset renewal budget, with the caveat that officers will work with the PGA to better understand the new operating environment and come back with recommendations on the permanent budgets going forward. With recommendations on the permanent budgets going forward.
Excuse me, Madam Mayor, would it be possible for these recommendations to go up on the screen?
I think if we put them all up at the end before we actually, and then we can review them all and do some wordsmithing and there shouldn't be. So we've just also made a comment there around the operational effectiveness review, and that would occur in year 3 through rates funding. We currently do not know the cost of that, so we'll... Right, moving on to the next funding request from Tū Tangata Maraenui Trust. And they have asked for funding for a clean-up day, which they had also done last year after through the COVID-19 recovery funds, and we have an officer's recommendation that they apply to the Community Development Project Fund, and the project aligns with its current criteria. So I'm supportive of the officer's recommendation as it stands.
I declared conflict on this, so. Yeah.
Councillor Tapani?
Can I get some response from the staff as to the difference between the requested 8,000, which I understood was asked, and the 5,000 recommended by the staff? I see in the brackets it's based on the previous grant, so did they apply for 5,000 last time round and were granted? What's our rationale there, please?
Through the Mayor, so yes, that was the previous grant. There was an extra top-up required. However, we have been in contact with Tū Tangata Maraenui, and there is actually funding available in Te Puawaitanga still. So we've actually asked them to make an application through there, and $8,000 is within the criteria and allocation available.
Sorry, Natasha, just for clarity, so 5,000 through this grant line and 3,000 through the whole lot through the Puawai?
They can apply for the whole lot through Te Puawaitanga.
All right, thank you.
Just update then that the recommendation is that they'll be applying for up to $8,000 through the Te Puawaitanga Fund. Moving on to the Ngā Whānau o Mangaru Education and Research Trust. The submitter has been referred to the Community Strategies team, and who are seeking clarification of the organisational status to assess suitability to receive a grant. So that is again an operational process that we've recommended that they work through in order to receive sponsorship for a venue, which is what they've asked for. Everybody happy with that recommendation? Yep, so no change there.
Could I just seek a little bit of clarification on this? They're seeking a venue to do the health checks?
It's an educational day. They're seeking a venue. We wouldn't provide them with the venue per se. We would provide them with a grant to actually pay for the use of a venue if they meet the criteria of any of the grants that are available. And that is also subject to the actual status of the organisation and whether they qualify for grant funding. Right, big one next, the Ahiriri Rock Pools Development Trust, who are asking us for $5 million contribution towards their project. And obviously this isn't something that we have consulted on separately, and it is a significant amount of money The only funds that we would have available would be the Council Projects Fund, which is $100,000 per annum, so clearly nowhere near adequate. This would need to be considered as a separate standalone item, either through our next long-term plan or as a significant amendment to our annual plan. So we would require a full business case from the trust, and as such, the feedback to them will explain this process. Councillor Wright.
Yes, I think it's clear that this request for this amount at this stage in the project is premature. My recommendation would be that the trust would go away and do a feasibility study or business case, and then present that back to the council, and if there is significant community support for the project, we may look at it. I'm just wondering if once the trust is formed, if there is any funding available that they could apply for to assist them with the feasibility phase of the project, and I would be supportive of that.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. And the funding that would be available would be coming from the Council Projects Fund, which is $100,000 per annum. Currently, we have nothing committed against that other than potentially some of the Enviro schools, which that could be spread over 3 years as well through the Council Project Fund. So it wouldn't have to be the whole $45,000 in the first year. So we do have capacity within that fund to allocate towards a feasibility study for this.
That would be my recommendation then, that we write back along the lines of, once the trust has formal trust status, the trustees then write to us to apply through that fund for funding to assist them with their feasibility study for the project.
Does anyone have a different view on providing or advising the trust to write to us seeking funding from the Council Projects Fund? Councillor Bode.
I don't support this project. I think it would go in the category of vanity projects. It's very exciting and interesting and different and new, but I think it's just such a huge change to our natural environment, and going to cost a huge amount of money, particularly if it goes ahead as planned, and there will be a lot of money required for ongoing maintenance. So even though I admire Graham Duncan and his group for putting this in front of us, it is quite exciting and different, innovative, but I just think it's way out there and beyond our means to fund something like this. So I don't support even the feasibility study.
Councillor McGrath, followed by Councillor Price.
Yeah, I have a differing opinion than Councillor Bogue. Through the presentation, it could actually tick off quite a few boxes for us. If we have to build a rock wall anyway, and there's already a non-natural stone rock development down there, I think when a member of the public comes to us and he's done this much work, as a council we need to stand up and listen and just have a look at it. And it's not a new idea. It was first mooted in 1995 and actually started in 95, but it didn't progress. And in fact, if you go down there, you'll see the non-natural stone that were already being started to be laid. So I support Councillor Wright, but I think we really need, and this isn't a council project, this has come from the community, and I think we need to assist our community to progress this forward. I'm not sure whether that's dollars or advice, assistance, but I just think we need to not shelve it.
Thank you, Councillor McGrath. Councillor Price.
Yes, I agree with Councillor Wright and Councillor McGrath. I think it's we need to help get a feasibility study because there's so much unknown. It's a great, when you look at it in a picture, it's great. It'll be great for the city, and I think sometimes getting out there for these sort of things is good. We're going to do a lot of work under the ground, and it would be good to do something above the ground if we can assist with it. So I think a good feasibility study will probably tell us whether we should support it further or shelve it.
Councillor Wright.
Just following on from Councillor McGrath's comments regarding, shoring up literally the walls there. The other benefits to this project are the health benefits and the swimming. And the thing that really captured me about this was the safe swimming and the ability for people to come and have a safe experience swimming in the sea, and the health benefits of that. And we're all being concerned lately about the lack of opportunities for people to swim and learn to swim, and I think this facility would do that. I also want to point out that there are a lot of these facilities in Australia, and encourage people to go online and have a look at them. And I've already had a call from someone last night reminding me that they've used these kinds of facilities in Australia and how fantastic they are. So while there are a lot of hurdles to overcome with a project of this size and this nature, there are potentially some great aspects of it. It is a concept. There are things that we could just do part of it. You don't have to do all of it as a community, but I think it's great to start a community conversation around the potential and what could be developed in that area.
Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, I concur with what Councillor Wright and the others have said, because I think there's actually a lot of boxes that might get ticked off, and I'm sure Mr. Dallimore will tell us that we'll never have a sandy beach again at West Shore, so that one could be ticked off. Some of the coastal protection. I also think from the swimming point of view that particular area has become hugely popular with ocean swimming, and the Sport Hawke's Bay presentation actually indicated that they have a program there, and the current design actually still allows for that. It also provides a safe swimming area. I don't believe necessarily 50-metre pool is required there, but I think let's have a look at it. Let's not throw it away, and it could be a huge success in the future.
So just to recap in terms of, Councillor Tapani.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I'm a little bit sceptical. I absolutely agree with all the positives that have been highlighted, and I concur with Councillor Wright's whakaaro that we really should start at least with a feasibility study. My apprehension comes from the national policy standards which have been indicated from central government, and particularly around the work in the marine area. There's a considered focus in that area there, so there will be layers of complications, but we don't know yet what those full layers are. So I am sceptical that this will get to fruition, but I think we need to at least invest in that feasibility study so that we can understand the scope and range of the costs. And that scepticism is also shared by the fact that our last conversation was around this very facility, which started out as a community project and potentially could end up on the council books. And I worry that this may be another community project that could end up on the council books that we're going to have to end up paying for in the long run. The impacts around and Māori and community events in those spaces. What I really would also love to see is for them to populate this idea in the public, because ultimately this will end up as a rate charge, and I'd like to see our public determine the value of these pools as the concept grows. Thank you.
Councillor Brown.
I think some of my scepticism was allayed a little bit when they had the same consultants that were advising them on the rock walls that we have for the coastal hazards strategy. So the work that the coastal hazards team are doing dovetails relatively nicely into this, and so there's going to need to be a man-made solution there at some point, tying in a recreational facility like this, which could have all these positive outcomes. Sounds like a bit of a win-win. So I support the taking this the next step forward and seeing where we can go.
Councillor Crown.
I think that by supporting them with some funding and recommending that they apply to us for some funding for the feasibility, it's actually a really low-risk way for us to support whether the idea comes to fruition or not. It's, from a ratepayer perspective, it shows that we are looking to enable community ideas and foster that sort of innovation, but also that we're protective and we don't want to go on the whole hog straight away. So I think it's a really tidy sort of compromise. So yeah, I'm more than happy to support the recommendation made by Councillor Wright.
Could I ask a question? How much would a feasibility study cost us, please?
I don't think that we could speculate on that, so I think we give. Yeah.
It's not us. It's not costing us. It's
Oh, so
costing
they
the
would.
trust. They would apply to us for funding to help them to pay for it. It's not us doing the feasibility study, is my understanding.
And is it my understanding that we could give them whatever we wanted? Is it?
Well, we have $100,000.
Yeah.
We can give them $1.
As in
We could
at our
give them-
discretion rather than what we want.
That's correct. It would be at our discretion how much we decided to fund the feasibility.
And we wouldn't therefore have to fund the full business case?
No.
Or feasibility study?
No.
Yeah.
Right, so to summarise, we are going to advise the Trust to write and apply to our Council Project Fund to assist with a feasibility/business case. Okay. Moving on to Pakistan and Friends Hawke's Bay Association Incorporated, who have asked for $1 million towards a Napier Islamic Centre. Again, this is something that we have not consulted on independently, and there is no funding set aside other than the Council Projects Fund. And we have the officer's recommendation to again go back and advise the Trust that this would require a full business case, and also that the Community Strategies team plan to develop a multicultural strategy, and discussions could occur within this process. Deputy Mayor Brosnan.
I'm really supportive of the association's plans. I think it's great that they're looking at establishing a place of worship for them in Napier, and would wholeheartedly support them following that. My concern was if council was to jump on board and fund this in any way, that we have a range of denominations and organisations that worship obviously over a broad range of religions, and whether or not we would be opening ourselves up, I suppose, to some sort of precedent around contributing to those development of places of worship, and whether that was something we wanted to get into was my concern with this request.
I agree completely, and this would be an opportunity to actually establish that council is not in the business of funding capital or operational costs associated with religious denominations.
Could I just make a comment about that? Although I completely understand and sympathise and agree in many ways, we have given tens of thousands of dollars to Marae, which I think are comparable. They're not religious organisations, but they're cultural centres. So we would have to be careful of the wording of any proviso we made to limit our funding away from what I see. This is a cultural centre, so we need to be consistent in our funding decisions.
And I think that they would always have the opportunity to apply to our existing grant funding if they were seeking some funding that would meet the criteria of those. So that would always be an option for any, one-off or anything, any projects that they were doing. But it's probably more around asking for something to this extent, a significant capital contribution to a project. Councillor Wright.
Yes, I agree that in this case a capital contribution is inappropriate, but what is something that councils can do is once these centres are established, and we have done this before, and they start running programs that are of obvious benefit to our community, then we can look at supporting those programs, and that is where council can step in, but certainly not in the capital development of these sorts of facilities.
And where we can assist with the initial stages is to have our officers assist an organisation to find land and provide advice in that capacity.
And through you, Madam Mayor, there was also a request for assistance to potentially find a temporary facility as well as potential land for the permanent. So we can work with representatives, as we would do with anyone, to see if we can facilitate something.
So council officers can work, I'm just trying to wrap some wordings and then I'll, work with the association to identify potential temporary premises and land for acquisition or lease. That council does not make capital contributions to the establishment of places of worship. Yep. But that applications can be made for grants to support programs and community programs. Sorry, Councillor Tapani, I was coming back to you as well.
I have a comment more than a question. Is that welcome? First of all, I'd like to acknowledge the association has been mentioned before, primarily because it's a demonstration of the diversity of our community and that there is the ability for them to bring their needs and their concerns before this council, which shows that, one, that we are moving into a wonderful space where our diversity is recognised and empowered to be able to participate with the democratic process here in Napier. But secondly, I'm really excited about the diversity that this represents for our city. I absolutely agree with the comments made by our councillors around this is not really our space, but we can look forward for future opportunities where we can help strengthen that diversity. By extension, what this also signals for me is the settlement and establishment of a number of cultures, well in this case our Pakistan friends here in Napier, and integrating into our community and looking for opportunities to settle and expand. So those are all wonderful indicators of a prosperous future.
Thank you, Councillor Tapani. Councillor Mawson, you're looking like you want to say something.
Yeah, if you could just repeat what you stated before about the whole comment, that's okay.
So council officers will work with the association to identify potential temporary premises and land for acquisition or lease. That council does not make capital contributions to the establishment of places of worship, but that applications can be made for grants to support community programs.
I'm not in complete, I don't completely disagree with that, but I'm just thinking, is it worth, I mean, I agree with trying to find them a premise, helping them through that, but just actually helping them find land. I just think with the amount of land that we have, do we really need to put that in there? Should that not be something that they pursue, rather than us helping them pursue that?
We do work with other groups when they're looking for land and just
making sure. I mean, we've been approached a lot by, and certainly through some of the submissions about land and having that available for housing and so forth. That was my point, really, just making sure. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. We're happy to move on to our next funding request from Cranford Hospice, $2 million towards the construction of their new hospice. We have had a submission in the past on this which was not supported. Again, the only funding available is the Council Projects Fund, and a project of this scale would need to be considered as a standalone LTP project and funded outside of the grants mechanisms for capital and operating. Deputy Mayor Brosnan.
Can I just ask a question to staff on whether we see any opportunities for in-kind contributions to this project? I seem to recall when they first came to council, we gave them some in-kind contribution, possibly through Lance's nodding, through our services team, and potentially around the roading or the bridge. I'm just trying to recall, and so just a question or clarification there. And I suppose from that, do we see any opportunity for in-kind contribution moving forward?
Madam Mayor, we sent our arborist out that did a full inventory of all the trees and gave that report back, and that was free of charge.
Through you, Madam Mayor, well, there may be some ability to look into that. I'm conscious that the long-term plan does have potential issues with deliverability that we've all been focusing on, and this, of course, will be another focus for audit when we finalise. So we would absolutely look into avenues, but if it came down to in-kind for projects such as roading and others, I would be reluctant given the scope and scale of the work that we need to undertake.
Councillor McGrath.
I think the management or officer's comments on here are very accurate. I come from a nursing background, and I certainly don't feel it's council's role to be building hospital wards or equivalent these days. Even though it's out in the community, we don't as a rule support district nursing and build facilities and bits and pieces. I think this is a central government role and needs to be funded directly by central government.
Councillor Wright.
While I agree with Councillor McGrath's comments, I'd also like to point out that there is a wider scope for this facility, including community gardens and arboretum, which will be quite significant. I don't know how many of you have been out to the site, but the potential for the development of those grounds into something quite special for our community exists. Therefore, I'm more inclined to support that side of what the facility is going to achieve for the community, and I would love to see us be able to at least match what the Hastings District Council have committed, even if we can't do it in year one, that we could look at making a contribution to the development of the gardens and arboretum in the future.
So just to seek some clarification on that, do we know if the general community will have access to the gardens, or will they only really be available to the residents and their whānau when they're there?
We could get clarification, but my understanding was that that was going to be a true community facility.
And I guess also, are we aware of I know that HDC has already contributed 500,000 to the project. Is that
Through the mayor, I'd need to find out. I can do that now if you like.
My understanding is that it's 500,000.
Total.
Yeah. The stage, they had committed more over a period of years, but they've drawn it back to the initial 500,000.
Councillor Taylor.
It's a very difficult one for me to be involved in, but I tend to concur with Councillor McGrath. Cranford Hospice provide a fantastic service to our community, and as indicated by Chris when he was speaking to us, a great deal of their current role is actually in the community, and the facility that they currently have in the future facility at Chester Hope is very much a setting or having medication set at the right level so that people can then return to their home or other facilities. What I find difficult is there is a lot of organisations in the health sector who are providing palliative care, and those are, some are charitable organisations and have charitable trust status, and I don't know that we would accept an application from those organisations to build or provide capital funding to build, as Councillor McGrath said, a ward or a hospice, basically. So I find it very difficult that we would look at funding the capital cost of a structure for that purpose.
Councillor Tapani.
Thank you. Through you, Your Worship, I absolutely love the concept behind and the ongoing service provision that the hospice delivers and seeks to deliver, but I also recognise that, as Councillor Taylor has mentioned, that a lot of these services are moving towards the home in those later stages. But my main point that I'm focusing on here for me is that as a result of a bequeath, this trust has come into the possession of quite a substantial land asset with quite a substantial dollar value, which presents options for leveraging and acquiring loans in order to do their own capital building and investment. And I, like Councillor McGrath, really struggle with the concept of investing in capital infrastructure for a health service or portions of it. And as for me personally, while I love it and would love to be in a position to support others to use that facility, I myself and my family, I don't see us ever being in a position to use that facility because we're whānau-centric and you're not going to be able to fit 40 of us in that little room. So while it's a wonderful facility and it will suit some, it won't suit all. And so the degree of community benefit for me is quite defined, and the scope of growth and opportunity for them with their land acquisition is quite significant. So I think they've got lots of room to move, and while I encourage opportunities to walk in partnership with them, perhaps not in capital investment.
Thank you, Councillor Tapani. So just to put some wording around this, I'm getting a sense that on the whole we're not supportive of a capital contribution. And so we're indicating that we may in the future be keen to explore opportunities to assist perhaps with some in-kind services with the gardens, but that there will be no capital funding available. Moving on to Velocity Kickboxing, who are seeking premises to expand their services. We have a officer's recommendation that we suggest they work with our community strategies team to seek further information and determine if any funding streams apply that they could access. All in agreement with the management comment? And then Citizens Advice Bureau Napier, who have come to us requesting increased funding. I do have in front of me some draft information around the service level agreement for Citizens Advice Bureau. Currently, they receive annual funding of $41,135. They have requested $87,094 per annum. Based on the assessment that's been undertaken and our service level agreement funding that's available, the officer's recommendation is that we increase their annual funding to $60,000. And could I just seek confirmation that that would be adjusted annually for?
Yes, it is with LGCI.
LGCI, thank you. Councillor Brown.
Just a question. They said in their presentation that they currently receive 15,000 for us as a rent top-up, which is temporary as they're expecting to have a house in the new library, or home, the new library. Just wondering where that money is currently coming from.
Through the Mayor, so that was funded through the Council Projects Fund as a one-off situation due to some circumstances where they had to leave their premises in Raffles Street and needed to get a private rental in town, and subsequently to that they've moved again into Bower Street for a 3-year lease. So the idea for the service agreement is to include that additional rent that they're paying as part of their service agreement going forward until the civic precinct master plan is finalised and whether or not they are involved in that.
So that 60,000 would enable them to cover the increased rental cost?
That's what we believe, yes.
Right. My understanding was that their rent was 31,000 and we were only giving them a $15,000 contribution towards that.
They already had some existing funding in their service level agreement for rent as a top-up.
Brilliant.
If we're all happy, then we will actually suggest that they continue to work through the service level agreement process with our community team with a view to entering into a $60,000 funding contribution from the 2021-22 year.
Another question, please. On this sheet here, the budgets for, these are our service agreements, I understand.
We have had an updated one emailed through yesterday, which is got some different figures than the hard copy one.
Do we approve these at this meeting? Or
No, we don't. The service level agreements are actually assessed and approved through an operational process. So this was just for our information in terms of considering submissions that were made by individual organisations.
Thank you.
Now, we'll just go back now to finalise the Hawke's Bay Community Fitness Centre Trust. And we have had through via an email, which you may not have had an opportunity to have a look at, just some indicators, indicative direct social and health benefit values, which total 91 million, and this is based on information that has been presented to us via the Trust in earlier sessions we've had from them. So just a caveat that this has been done rather quickly for us, but I think it's undeniable that there are significant economic, social and health benefits to the sports park.
Through you, Madam Mayor, can I please put another caveat on it? Yep. So many councillors will recall that the benefits that were provided to us were based on an Australian KPMG study. I'm not suggesting that that isn't like for like, but we've extrapolated those figures for New Zealand. So direct benefits of approximately 35 million based on the Australian piece of work, social benefits of 27.5 and health benefits estimated to be 28.5 million. Thank you.
Is that region-wide?
Yeah. Yep. Thank you.
So we were considering a $1 million contribution in light of the fact that recent challenges we've experienced are limiting our ability to honour our original unbudgeted $2 million contribution. So seeing this as a way to move forward and still be a part of this fantastic regional facility. For that to be loan funded with payment being made to the Trust in the 21-22 year and a rates impact of around 0.1% from the 22-23 year. So I'd just like to propose that that is the response that we give back to the Trust.
How much was it?
1 million.
Just through the media, I just do want to point out as part of this decision-making process that we would normally expect to rate fund our operating costs, and because this is a grant, it would normally be expected to be rate funded. However, we have created through our revenue and financing policy the ability to loan fund, so this is going through that exception process of having that balanced budget. So I just wanted to make that clear to Council that they're making that decision.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor.
Could I just ask a further question of Adele in our risks part of this particular paper? You mentioned substantive changes to recommendations such as directions to increase budgets and award substantial grants, etc., etc. Making this decision, if we make this decision, will that substantively affect the work that the officers have to do to have this LTP signed off within the required timeframe?
Through the Mayor, will have an impact on what needs to be done, because once we start to impact even a number of areas, it does tend to flow onto quite a lot of documents, and so I'm appreciative that you have noted that that is a risk for us, but we'll obviously do everything we can to deliver on time.
Deputy Mayor Brosnan.
Just a question, Dale. Acknowledging it's unusual to take a loan for a grant like this, what is the term of the loan that we would be proposing for this and the total cost to repay it?
Through the Mayor, so our loans are based on a 25-year loan. So you're looking at the cost. So if we're looking at $1 million, you're looking at $45,000 a year on loan and interest repayments. But these are based on assumptions. In the earlier part of the year, the LTP based on the rates that we're currently experiencing for taking out those loans, which may actually differ over time. So I don't have the 25-year view at the moment, but our loans are typically 25 years.
And would there be the ability to repay that loan early should we decide and have funds available to do that?
Through the Mayor, absolutely. So we have made discretionary payments of loans previously when it comes to year end, if there's a desire from Council to repay.
Councillor Brown.
I'm just wondering how this fits into the big picture. So if we give $1 million here, just thinking in the back of my mind, there's some other projects that I'd like to give $1 million to. Does that negate us being able to put some money into something else?
It doesn't negate us being able to do that, just recognising that obviously any money spent does have an impact on rates, so that would need to be considered.
Others haven't applied.
Yep.
Through the LTP process.
So currently we have just that this funding was not included as a separate consultation topic in the long-term consultation document. Council support loan funding of $1 million in year one of the long-term plan. We'll get all of the recommendations up because we've worked through them all now. There may be a little bit of wordsmithing required.
Your Worship, further to Councillor Brown's point, is there an opportunity that we consider funding requests and come back to this one after the rest of our deliberations? Because I think rightly pointed out there are a number of other projects that may want to take up that capacity on our loan funding.
I think that's a very good idea.
Thank you.
Okay. So that does bring us to moving to other items. Would anyone like a quick 5-minute break before we? Yeah. So we will just have a quick 5-minute break.
That means
reconvene at 10:35. That's an 8-minute break.
Yeah, 5-minute break.